World War II. I was born May 7, 1941, and the war in Europe was in full swing. The United States was still neutral, however, until Japan bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Dad went to work in one of the new defense plants in Marshall, Texas. Mom and Dad were young with a new baby and money was very tight. They found a room in a boarding house that met their budget. Mother always liked to recount that, after they moved in, they discovered that it was more of a house of ill repute. We lived for a short time with my dozer grandparents and finally in a house of our own in the city of Forney. Just after buying their own house, Dad departed for Germany in the war. Mom took in a young schoolteacher as a boarder to help pay the bills. She was about Mom's age, and she became a friend and babysitter. Her name was Dixie. She was straight out of college and a teacher in Forney. While Mom was struggling with being left behind with a house and son to support, Dad was entering the fighting in Europe. Dad later related how his ship was attacked as it was about to make port. He made his way through Belgium and into Germany and arrived at the Remagen Bridge the day after it collapsed. This was a railroad bridge across the Rhine River that the Germans had failed to blow up. The battle for this bridge later became the focus of several war movies. Dad crossed the Rhine on the Linz pontoon bridge a couple of miles south of the collapsed bridge. He joined up with an armored division and tank destroyer unit as a radio man. A few weeks later, as they advanced toward Berlin, he was one of the first to discover the concentration camp near Nordhausen, Germany. He had taken photos of more than 5,000 bodies piled in rows where the German army had abandoned the camp. Dad rarely talked about the war and I never saw these photos until years later. The war ended in late 1945, but Dad spent several months in Austria and Germany before returning home. Dad returning from the war. My dad was away fighting in World War II for several of these preschool years. One of my vivid memories as a preschooler was perhaps at the age of 4 years or so. We were living at the house in downtown Forney, across from the Methodist church. I walked into my mom's bedroom, and she was draped sideways across the double bed just bawling her eyes out. I don't remember the words, but I remember that she was crying because Dad was gone to the war and she was lonely. It is funny looking back and examining your perspectives. I, like any child, thought of my mom as the epitome of maturity. She was 21 or 22, a girl from the country, just starting her life. I look at my two oldest girls now, near 19 and the other 21, and it is quite a contrast to think of them as I would have at that age. I can't remember much about my dad's actual return from the war, but I do remember seeing him in his uniform, and there is some faint memory of a train. There might have been some minor disciplinary problems upon his return as illustrated by another vivid incident in my recollections. I'm not sure how the car keys got in my hands, but Dad asked me to bring them to him. After the second or third request, the request became a or else demand. Showdown time. I remember hitting the screen door in a full run. I'm sure I made it almost all the way around the house before he caught me. That's not bad for a 4-year-old versus a young war veteran of 25. His style was not the striped leaf switch, it was the always-present leather belt. I remember the thrill of the chase, but not really the agony of the belt. I am sure, however, that was the way the incident ended. Broken concrete sidewalks and steel wheel roller skates. Strange how certain factors seem to play such a big part in memories. It seems that something quite important in my preschool days was the sidewalk in front of our house. I did spend a lot of time playing on that sidewalk. It was constructed of concrete poured in 4-foot sections and was about 3 feet wide. It must be remembered that Forney was a black land farming town, and the soil is black, buckling clay that heaves and sinks, leaving foundations and sidewalks buckled and slanted. This was my raceway. 4-foot sections of concrete, each smooth and hard laid end to end, each slanted and tilted at different angles with edges sticking up and out here and there. Skates at that time were made of steel. They used a key to tighten the side clamps to the sole of your shoe. There were leather straps that threaded over the top of the shoe also. The steel wheels on concrete skidded as much as rolled and made a distinctive loud roar as you skipped from one concreted slab of the sidewalk to the next, dodging the protruding edges and gliding with expert ability. These skating sessions ended as many times as not abruptly with the dreaded slow motion out of control sprawl, hands out, knees, elbows, chins, scraping the concrete, changing the exhilaration suddenly to fiery pain and blood. Funny, I can't remember taking skates off. I remember the trips to the bathroom medicine cabinet. There were only 2 basic medications: mercurochrome and camphenique. Skating contusions were the domain of mercurochrome. This product was fondly called monkey blood by my mom. She took great pleasure in painting large parts of my body with the bright red liquid. The little bottle had a glass rod applicator that seemed to make the product unique. I didn't intend to make medicine a part of this, but it does seem to keep coming to mind. Camphanique was used for other embarrassing problems. This is hard for a 46-year-old man to talk about, but I am now talking about a 4-year-old boy, not a man. What's embarrassing about camphanique? It's used on chiggers, get the itch? Chiggers seemed to be a bigger problem back then. Why? The lawn grass was all Bermuda grass, not St. Augustine. I'm not even sure it existed then. There were very few insecticides, DDT was being used for real problems, but no one thought of controlling insects in a lawn. There were bigger things to worry about than chiggers. Not if you were a little boy who sat and played in the grass and yard all day, every day. I will be more specific at the risk of being tacky. Doctoring sessions consisted of me standing in the bathroom, again, stripped naked, while my mother scratched with her long nails to remove each little red bug. Her eyes must have been fantastic, yes, she was 21. The place these little demons loved best, however, was my little boy parts. She would treat it just like the red marks around my waist, first picking the little demons and then dabbing the area with camphanique. After a half hour of the procedure, I remember the instructions, now just stand there till it dries and don't move. How embarrassing. I don't think it was embarrassing then though, it was part of my growing up. Since we are on medicine, let's cover all the bases. Castor oil was something I always heard about in dreaded terms, but never really was exposed to. Castoria was another thing though. If I refused to eat. If I ate too much. If I was cranky and irritable. If I was wild. Whatever the extremity of behavior I displayed, this was taken as grounds for a dose of Castoria. I am still not sure whether this was given to solve suspected problems created by constipation or if it was just another form of corporal punishment. All I do know is that if the problem did not justify a switch or a leather belt, it could be solved with a couple of tablespoons of Castoria. By the way, anybody can take the first tablespoon. It's the second tablespoon that is real punishment. And the real discipline comes from knowing that if you do not swallow it all, or if you leave some small part in the bottom of that gigantic tablespoon, a whole new fresh tablespoonful will be poured and taken before the ordeal is over. I think that mercurochrome, camphanique, and Castoria pretty much covers the total medical spectrum of my mom. Calamine lotion might have been a late-comer, but this product would fall in the category of late-coming miracle drugs. Grandmother's medicine. Going to the country, a trip of 5 miles to my Mama Doe's house exposed me to at least one other commonly used drug. Kerosene. She had a raised wooden walkway that connected the main house to the cistern, to the smoke house, to the toolshed, to the garage. It consisted of 3 feet long wooden planks nailed side by side to runners of 2x6s. This raised walkway was great for keeping feet dry and free of the black mud that was everywhere when it rained. Remember, this is a farm, lawn grass was not big, the chickens preferred to scratch in the dirt. Back to the point, the nails in this walkway had a way of pulling up and out. A little boy has a way of stumping his toe and stepping on these nails. Rusty nails, dirt, lockjaw. Kerosene to the rescue. Mama Doe would sit me down, wash my foot, put my foot in a metal enamel-coated bowl, and pour in the kerosene. I don't recall any injury that was too large or small for a dose of kerosene at Mama Doe's. By the way, as I recall, she also had a bottle of Castoria. Maybe this is where Mom learned. I am sure many of you have read about how the mind works when it links events and makes associations in order to remember. It appears that no matter how logical I think my mind works, the way I write this book will be just a linking of one trigger word or event that keys another memory. So now, let us go on about kerosene. Kerosene was around for medical purposes because it was the fuel of choice for cooking and heating. It was better known as coal oil in those days. My mom had natural gas, and Mama Doe had recently converted to butane, but all the workers' shacks still used coal oil. My granddad, Daddy Doe, was a black land farmer who raised mainly cotton. The cotton was picked or pulled by hand, and this requires the help of itinerant workers. These workers were semi-permanent residents on the farms. Their shacks were common and of a standard design. 1 or 2 large rooms, a large front porch, an outhouse out back. Cooking and heating with coal oil, food supplied by a Saturday trip to one of the 4 grocery stores in Forney. These black workers were something of a mystery to me in that contact or socialization with these people was very limited for a young white boy. I did spend some days monitoring the cotton scales that hung on the cotton wagon in the field during picking time. The pickers would bring the great long canvas sacks stuffed full of cotton to the wagon and hang them on the balance beam scales for weighing. They were paid by the pound for the cotton they picked. I guarantee you, scuffing along between the rows of cotton on your knees, pulling the cotton sack, pulling the bolls that cut and stick your fingers is truly backbreaking work. My job was to keep an eye on the pickers to make sure they did not stuff too many dirt clods in the bags. One of those things that sticks in my memory is of a young, strong, black man, sweating, smiling, and talking of spending the whole day's wages on this black whore in Segoville. I am not sure now how much of what he was talking about I understood. But I do remember that I was impressed by him and his tales.